Hi, everybody. Ian Bremmer here, and a quick take to kick off your week. Want to talk about Iran, where military strikes are looking increasingly imminent. There is one more round of talks that is scheduled, at least in principle, for Thursday back in Geneva with the Americans and the Iranians. But so far, it looks like the Iranians are hunkering down. They are not willing to engage at all on their ballistic missile program or much of anything on support for proxies across the region. Depending on who you talk to in the White House, those things are critically important, or maybe you can just focus on the nuclear enrichment for a deal. But even on nuclear enrichment, the American position and President Trump's position has been none should be allowed at all, and the Iranians have not been willing to accept that. What appears to be the case is that the United States is wavering from ordering a full decapitation strike. And if the United States is thinking about more limited strikes to begin with, the Iranians feel like they're capable of handling that, withstanding that, as they have in the last year and in previous occasions, and that they then think they'll be in a better negotiating position because the Americans won't necessarily want to do more. And the United States feels like the U.S. will be in a better position. And when there's a difference in that view, of course, that's usually when you don't have anything like a breakthrough. We've seen that historically in a bunch of different negotiations in the Middle East and around the world. And so at this point, it seems like the engagements from the Iranians diplomatically are just to keep talks going. And from the Americans are to do some box checking to say, yes, we tried, but now we're going to engage in strikes. And so it seems to me that these are coming relatively soon. You now do have all of the military in place. It's very expensive to bring them and to keep them there. It's taken a month from the initial ordering of having that capability for military strikes to getting everything there, including a carrier group just off of Israel, both for a second vector of missile strikes, but also to more effectively help protect the Israelis, assuming Iranian missile strikes against them. It looks more likely that this would also lead to more Israeli strikes against Hezbollah in Lebanon, which has been more or less kept up as a ceasefire, again, with breaches, but still not nowhere near the fighting that you had before. But Israel would see this as an opportunity to go after what had been the most powerful Iranian proxy that threatened Israel in the region. If there's going to be strikes, and it's going to be strikes against Israel, their perspective would be, why wouldn't you take that opportunity? There are some limited demonstrations going on in Iran right now. Looks like they've been sort of commemorating 40 days since the initial protest that led to thousands and probably tens of thousands of Iranian civilians killed. The size of these protests this time around are, at least at this point, nowhere close to what they were back in January. And interestingly, despite the fact that President Trump had originally said that he would rescue the Iranian protesters, the or else in terms of negotiations with Iran have nothing to do with support for protesters or with open elections and representative government, have everything to do with the broader issues that the U.S. has had with Iran for a long time now on their nuclear weapons program or the precursors to it, as well as other programs that are a national security threat to the U.S. and its allies in the region. That is likely to continue to be the focus. And so if you're hoping that the Iranian people are going to come out better from all of this, that seems unlikely, despite the apparent imminence of strikes. I think one of the reasons why oil prices haven't gone up more is because the markets believe that these strikes, though likely, are going to be contained in the near term and aren't likely to lead to a massive Iranian retaliation. I suspect that's right, but there's always a tail risk. This isn't like Venezuela. There are lots of vectors where you could see expanding crisis, especially if Iran or its proxies, the Houthis in Yemen, are capable of blowing up an American tanker or a military, a warship that could kill American servicemen and women on duty in the region. And that, of course, would lead to very significant escalation. There's certainly a possibility of that. Having said all of that, the United States is making this decision basically by itself. The Saudis, who initially had said that they strongly oppose such strikes, are now privately saying, well, it would look weak if you back down after all this military buildup in the region. So we're not really going to push back. And if you do strike, we'll be very supportive. The UAE, I would say, is even more in that category. Turkey continues to oppose. But that's not about it in terms of strident opposition from American allies. The Europeans aren't seen as very relevant here. Russia and China have been involved in small-scale military drills with the Iranians back, I guess, February 19th. And they, of course, would both oppose U.S. strikes in Iran, but they're not prepared to actually do anything about it, just like they weren't prepared to do anything about it with Venezuela. So, yes, supporters of Iran, even broadly speaking, aligned with Iran. But even if the Americans engage in regime change, there is no effective deterrence against American military power. And this is very different from the way we think about, say, U.S. tariffs, where the Chinese were able and willing to hit the Americans back and changed the nature of U.S. policy on security issues around the world, both in America's backyard and in the Middle East. That's clearly not the case. And so we'll see how this plays out over the coming days and weeks. But at this point, I'd be hunkered down for expectations of military strikes. And the response, well, we will wait and see. That's it for me, and I'll talk to you all real soon.